Kelly Taylor, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Bill. How are you doing today?
You know what? It's always a great day when we get together and we're talking about the things that we want to be talking about and just sharing moments that give us the opportunity to not only share our experiences, but hopefully continue the dialogue of, what people who click on these video recordings that we do and say, hey, give us something new today. Give us something fresh. So, yeah, it's just good to be together and talking about these issues for sure.
I couldn't agree more. And I think now more than ever is the time to be talking about these things. And hopefully people are finding them helpful as well.
And full transparency, you and I had a meeting with folks from Promise Place, which is one of our certainly special resource folks in the community. And turns out that they're doing similar things like us, doing the podcast things and just trying to get information out there. So it's exciting that we're all on the same track and working on these things together.
Yes, it is.
Today's topic is anxiety. And so, one of the first things I want to say about that, Kelly, is that we're hardwired, right, to survive. And we kind of talked a little bit about that when in suicide awareness, that we're hardwired to survive and to get through adversity, to get through challenges, to get through difficult times. So anxiety really is a part of who we are and what we are. That actually is a good thing. It lets us know, hey, there's some trouble out there. Pay attention. This could be dangerous. So you need to pay attention to this. And that is a good thing to have. It's a good built-in, hardwired, natural device for us to have as we walk through this life and all the different, little dangers that can be out there. So when people say, oh, anxiety, it's like, hey, wait, anxiety is our friend. At least it can be.
Exactly. I mean, I think that if we didn't experience some sort of anxiety on a daily basis, there would be a lot of things that wouldn't get done. So, right. I definitely agree with you that anxiety to some extent is a very good thing. It's what motivates us to go and do our jobs, projects, that type of thing. So I think some sort of anxiety can be a very healthy thing.
Right. We hope we have students, clicking on this and taking this journey with us as we have these talks. And I remember a long time ago being a student and the test anxiety, right? I got a test coming up, or I got a big paper or a big assignment, whatever. And the anxiety starts to build as the date starts to get closer. Why? Well, it's because it's like, you need to get this thing done, man, or you're not going to get a good grade. You're going to fail, you're going to waste all that money you put into your education and so forth and so on. The anxiety is to let us know, hey, again, your attention is needed. Pay attention to detail, pay attention to deadlines. Again, when you're driving, recently, one of our colleagues was in a close call there, and the anxiety of, wait, that car is not driving very safely, and the speed, yikes, I got to get out of the way. So the anxiety, again, is this mechanism of, okay, let's keep us safe. And, we think back to the caveman, and we don't have the saber-toothed tiger, tracking us down, or the woolly mammoth that's going to stomp on us. But yet we had that, the fire. We got to keep the fire going, for warmth and cook the food and safety and all that kind of thing. And speaking of food, we got to have food, right? We got to be hunting and fishing and collecting the berries and the nuts and all that kind of thing. So the anxiety was there to keep us moving, to keep us going, to make sure we have the things that we need. So that's the good use of anxiety. But we're here to talk about when anxiety is a little hyperactive, so to say. So if you have this anxiety, which is a physiological response, back to our discussion in depression, where genetics, you got the whole, there's a biochemical thing going on in our brains. We have the predisposition genetically. We have life experiences But when that anxiety mechanism, we call it the fight or the flight, right? We're either going to get this anxiety and we're going to fight whatever it is that's threatening us, or we're going to get the heck out of there. That's the flight. We're going to find an escape route and we're going to leave. I'm going to walk into a room. Whoa, that's way too many people. I'm out the back door, right? So it's the fight or the flight. So the physiological nature of it is that these chemicals are being released from the brain into the body. Cortisol, the hormones, adrenaline, that's pumping up the body for whatever this threat is that we're perceiving. And so, boom, there it is, this whole physical mind-body reaction. And so, again, if it's doing that type of thing, the brain and the anxiety mechanism during periods of our day that, wait, there are no really threats here. So why am I having all this anxiety? So that's kind of what our focus is on today, is understanding what happens when you have all this anxiety going on, but there's really, that threat's not in the room. There is no saber-toothed tiger. There is no woolly mammoth tracking you down at the moment in time. But yeah, what happens when anxiety gets out of control?
Exactly. And there are a lot of people, like you were saying, the fight or flight, that there are a lot of people that have anxiety to the extent that it's kind of like the bear, chasing. I mean, if you have a bear chasing you, that is a normal response. I mean, anyone would be anxious over that and start to run or want to run, even if they didn't run. And that would be a normal response. But someone that has anxiety or anxiety disorder, oftentimes they are constantly in that state of, oh, it's the bear, I have a bear chasing me. And that's how their body and their mind is constantly reacting to different things throughout their day.
So fight, flight, and we're going to talk about symptoms in a moment. And there's even one more, and that's freeze, right? I mean, sometimes the anxiety gets so overwhelming that we just freeze. We shut down. We lock down in place and immobilized. And again, that's one of the reactions, one of the consequences of anxiety is when you just shut down. And it's hard to be productive when you're shut down, right? It's hard to meet deadlines when you've shut down. It's hard to go places and do things that you need to do when you are shut down. And so we'll talk about the different kinds, maybe a good segue into the different kinds of anxiety, the disorders that manifest, and then we'll talk about symptoms as we go along with each of these. So anxiety we talk about depression, it's like, oh, there's depression, right? Now, when we talk about anxiety, there's different ways that we can talk about it, different manifestations, mental health disorders, if you will. But we'll kind of take one at a time and just kind of go down it. Generalized anxiety disorder, right? Generalized, GAD, as it were, GAD. Probably we all have had this at some point in our lives, generalized anxiety. What sticks out to you as kind of those symptoms or features of generalized anxiety that we get?
So basically, this is an exaggerated worry. You're worried your everyday routine or life events and activities, something that's lasting 6 months or more. Often with this, you have physical symptoms, are fatigued, often fatigued, trembling. You could have muscle tension and tremors with this, headache, nausea, those types of symptoms. It can, when you freeze, basically, as you were just saying, it can make you, the physical symptoms of this can actually make you very sick or feel so sick that you don't feel like doing anything. You don't feel like functioning. And so there's that freeze response and kind of shuts your body down or shuts you down. And in talking about anxiety, the thing about this, and I know we talked about depression in our last Let's Talk series, but in talking about anxiety now, one of the things I did want to note and should have mentioned earlier, Bill, is that, anxiety disorders are the most common illness in the United States, and it affects over 40 million adults, 18 and older. That is a really large number. And so that is 18.1% of our population every year. And the thing is that they're highly treatable. And so it's a matter of just.
Yeah. So, and the statistics really spell it out. And again, we all should have some amount of anxiety as we travel through our day. It helps guide us and keep us safe. The generalized anxiety is, as you mentioned, really the chronic nature of worrying. In my family, we called it Negative Nelly. You probably have that one person in your family who's a Negative Nelly. They're always worried about something. This is good. Well, you can't do this because this is going to happen. And that you can't do that because that's going to happen. And so we have a chronic Negative Nelly going off in our head, predicting failure, predicting something horrible is going to happen. And it just goes on and on. And again, anxiety being if it's used in appropriate ways to make decisions and to guide us. But we're talking now, we're getting into the field in realm of when it starts to impair our ability to function. So this chronic anxiety, and again, you have those chemicals leaking from your brain out into your body, and your stomach gets upset. You get nauseous. You get those kind of things. You get the headache. And so those are the physical manifestations, of anxiety. But yeah, the generalized anxiety, probably the most common form of anxiety disorders, and that's just when it gets that Negative Nelly concept going, where I just know it's going to end bad. I'm just always worried about it, and it creates that negativity too, right? Thus the Negative Nelly. It's just the whole sense of optimism or possibility just kind of evaporates and goes away, and nothing seems like it's ever right. And it's tough to be around somebody like that, isn't it?
It truly is. I mean, and if you find yourself around someone like that, I mean, I've had to do this for myself, actually. If I have, say, a friend or a loved one that is constantly in that state, sometimes you just have to remove yourself from that situation, because before you know it, it almost starts to kind of rub off, and you don't even realize it.
And that's a great segue into, we talk about counseling and being counselors and helping others. Oftentimes we literally feel people's stress. And I don't know if people understand that, but those who are listening, and it's like, yeah, I get that. And so when you're working with people who have a lot of anxiety, depression, stress, we who are, there to help and assist, through empathy, we actually feel a lot of that. And so, when it's our job, it's like, yeah, we get that. But, if I'm not at my job, I'm not going to hang around with people that I'm going to wear that stress and anxiety. It's like, no, I need to be around people who kind of promote that positivity and that good vibe. And that's why, those who are suffering from anxiety and impaired by anxiety, we really want to help them find their way out of that darkness. And I use the term darkness when we talk about suicide, we talk about depression, but it really is a dark place that these things can take us to. And our goal is to help people find their way out of that dark space and into more light. And we'll continue to talk about that. So generalized anxiety disorder, let's talk about obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. Again, if you're taking the acronym, probably most associated with, and we can talk about specific examples of people that you've known or things that you've done. But so obsessive compulsive, kind of spells it out. You obsess about something, then you do something compulsive afterwards for a purpose. So, for example, if I get in my head this obsession that something bad's going to happen today, Kelly, I just know it. For example, I do have one daughter who's going to the airport in Raleigh to pick up another daughter. And I just know that they're going to be in an accident, Kelly. And if I don't do something about that, Kelly, there's going to be something bad and an accident's going to happen. So I'm going to go over to my light switch and I'm going to turn on my light switch off and on 10 times repetitively. And if I do that, then something bad is less likely to happen. So I'm going to go over and do that 10 times, and I'm going to walk away, but then the obsession is going to hit me again, Kelly, and I'm going to walk back to that light switch and do it 10 more times. Because I got to make it so that, that something bad doesn't happen to my daughters while they're traveling to and from Raleigh. And so I'll repeat that pattern over and over again because the obsession just won't go away. And I have to do that compulsive behavior to try to make myself feel better that somehow magically something bad's not going to happen.
Yes, and you see this show up a lot too. People that have are obsessed about germs and things like that, or they might take their own utensils out, places to eat, or very meticulous in the way that they keep their house, and those types of things. They have different rituals as far as the way they enter their house and all of that. So it shows up, I think, in different ways for sure. But I've seen it in numerous ways.
Yeah, so transparency and self-disclosure. Why do we go into the professions that we do? Probably because we've seen our family or people we grew up with struggle with mental health issues or whatever. So one of the weird things my dad did when I was younger is he would pace off how many steps from wherever he was in the house to another point in the house. It could be like stepping it off like you're outside and you're trying to set a volleyball net up or cornhole boards up and you're pacing off, the distance between. And I'm like, what in the world's going on? Why is he doing that for? And then, again, it was just one of those things. You get older for me, and it was studying psychology and studying human behavior and then having those conversations and knowing, Dad had a lot of anxiety. He had a lot of depression that he dealt with. And during undue points of anxiety, he would go through some of those rituals you were talking about. And again, it's just something that the brain does, which you and I were talking a little bit before, and that's to get control of a situation. So many things that we obsess about, worry about, fret about are things we can't control, that are outside our ability to fix. But, we're worrying about them, we're obsessing about them. And so we do things in an attempt to try to feel like, I'm doing at least something that's helping me feel in control.
Yes, I had a family member that every time they would go out to eat, it didn't matter where, they had to take their own cup, and it had to be their cup, and it had to be filled a certain way with a certain amount of ice. I mean, it was just so, and it was like that all the time. And there were lots of different things such as that throughout her life. As you said, she had to be in control, and that was part of her control. But her taking her cup of ice, her cup, and then having the set amount of ice and all of that, and it had to be done in a certain order, a certain way. Don't put the tea in first. Don't. Right. Those types of things.
If the order gets messed up, then you got to start over again. So again, when we talk about impairment to do the things you need to do, how could that cause someone problems with their job? Well, they're constantly showing up late, right? Why? Because I'm having to do these rituals before I come to work, and then anything that interferes with those rituals, I got to go back. And so before I know it, 30, 60 minutes later, now I'm showing up late to work, and this thing called anxiety is now impairing my ability to do the things that I need to be able to do.
And then it can also be a real problem at their job, because if they're the type of person that has to do things just so, and they do have rituals, if there's a job they have where they have to be able to multitask, then that can start to cause issues as well. Absolutely.
So generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, again, all related to anxiety. Panic disorder. Ooh, now this one's a scary one for people. I'll let you talk about that.
Panic disorder can make you feel like you are going to die. I actually have experienced this one time in my life. It came out of nowhere. I still, to this day, I'm not really sure why it even occurred. I was married at the time, and my husband was deployed. Well, this may be why, but my husband was deployed, and my father-in-law had to go into the hospital for open heart surgery. And I was in the hospital with him and my mother-in-law, and all of a sudden I was standing in the hallway, and I felt like I was the one getting ready to have the heart attack. It was an absolutely miserable feeling. My chest started to tighten up. I felt a heaviness on my chest. I felt like I could not breathe. I started to sweat, tingling and numbness. I mean, it was really bad. And it's just this sense of panic. Like, what in the world is going on? Am I dying? It's terrible. And I didn't know what it was at the time. I had no clue. I'd never had one before. So of course I went to see a doctor, and they told me that's what I was having was a panic attack. I've never had one since. I don't ever want another panic attack because it is awful. But my breathing, my breathing was all over the place. So, I mean, that's been my experience. I've seen other people have them, but that's also been my personal experience with a panic attack.
Yeah, and you captured it, I think, perfectly, because what a panic attack will do is it really mimics symptoms of a heart attack. And what you just described, you go to the hospital and they'll say, well, you just kind of described a heart attack, but then they put you up to all the monitors and the machines and they test your heart and they say, well, that wasn't, you weren't having, a heart attack or anything like that. But it sure felt like it. And when you feel like you're dying, that is not a fun sensation, not good at all. And so it really will disturb people, freak people out. And as you said, anybody that's ever had them doesn't want another one. But we have people who have that disorder, and we'll have them on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And that can really impair and even immobilize folks from going out. It's like, no way, I can't go out and have a panic attack because it just totally freaks me out. I can't go to work and do that. I can't go to church and do that. I can't go to the grocery store and do that. So it really is a pretty severe manifestation of anxiety is the panic disorder.
And yeah, absolutely. And I also think somebody that lives with that, there's this fear too of, oh my goodness, what if I go out and someone sees me having this? And so, that I think they worry about that, which then even makes it worse, the situation worse. And then, it's then that can cause a panic attack.
And that's the ugly thing and the unfair thing about anxiety disorders is because it's a vicious cycle, right? I mean, the anxiety and how it manifests in the ways we've talked about so far, and then the worry about that wave of anxiety coming on in the form of obsessions and compulsions, in the form of negative thinking, in the form of a panic attack, just the anxiety worrying about when it's going to happen again, well, it creates the episode. It lends itself to creating all the elements necessary and needed to have those types of episodes. So it really is a vicious cycle when you boil it all down. Another anxiety disorder, phobias. Probably one of the most common movies are made about arachnophobia, right? Fear of spiders. And it's Halloween, and one of my colleagues has a big, fake spider hanging up in her in her cubicle right now, and I'm waiting for somebody to come by and scream when they see it. But when you have a fear of something, whether it's elevators or water or bridges or spiders or snakes or whatever, it's to the point where even thinking about it can kind of create that freeze response and immobilize someone from going out and living life.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I knew someone who did not know how to swim and was just absolutely petrified of water. And therefore, I mean, they wouldn't dream of getting on a boat, going to the ocean. Absolutely not. You know, that type of thing. So yes, you know, it's disabling. It can be disabling, you know, when you have that phobia, whatever that might be. Being afraid of the dark, not wanting to be in the closed in spaces, as you were saying. So, you know, traveling can be difficult, especially if you're, you know, on an airline. Absolutely not. You know, they can't do it.
And, you know, as we said, so we talk about the individual being affected by it, but again, think about families. It's like, you know, if this anxiety disorder manifests and now not only does the individual have to deal with it, but yeah, the partner of the individual, the children of the individual, the parents of the individual. It's like, well, now we can't take vacations to the beach anymore, right? Or take vacations to the mountains and climb up tall mountains because we're afraid of heights. And so, yeah, it definitely gets problematic, not just for the individual, but for the families of the individual also. And they have to kind of deal with that too. Post-traumatic stress disorder, another manifestation of an anxiety disorder. Oftentimes we associate that with our veterans, those who have been in the military, those who've seen battle and violence, our law enforcement who've seen that. So triggering events, right? So post-traumatic stress disorder is a result of being in a very, very violent, traumatic experience, episode. And then it's triggered by memories, recollections, dreams, you know, different things that can trigger it. You and I, prior to this, we're talking about even sounds and smells. You know, if you hear a loud bang, it can certainly trigger the post-traumatic reflex or response. But there are other things besides our veterans and war and violence in that regard. We'll mention a few of the others that can create the post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes. So, you know, last week I was vulnerable, I feel like, and I shared a little bit about myself. And I told people in our depression video that there was a time in my life where I went through some very traumatic times, and it was actually for years that I experienced that. And that actually was, it was abuse. It was sexual abuse from a family member, and it happened for years. And so anyone that wanted to see that could go back and watch our depression video. I'm not really going to get into that right now, but because of that, you know, I was told I couldn't talk about it. So fast forward years later, I had suppressed all of that. And then as I got older, all of that started to bubble to the surface. And, you know, as you were saying, Bill, a lot of people associate that with our veterans. And unfortunately, the other thing that people associate with PTSD is violence. They think when somebody has PTSD or has been associated with PTSD, they think that automatically means that someone's going to come in and, you know, bring a weapon and try and hurt people, or, you know, blow something up or beat someone up. And that's not the case. I mean, I'm not saying that it can't happen or that it hasn't happened. I mean, if you go to someone who has PTSD or who has been in a time of war and something is triggering, say like fireworks, or if they, you know, if you wake them up in the middle of the night and that's something they told you not to do for a certain reason, then the response might not be exactly what you want to see. But I'm saying all of this to say that I got a diagnosis of PTSD. So it was post-traumatic stress disorder. And the way that that showed up was because I had suppressed all of those feelings because I was told I could not talk about it. It was the family secret. The reason why it was that way was because my parents thought at that time, I mean, I'm almost 48 years old. Back then, we didn't talk about it. it was pushed under the rug because they were worried it would ruin my reputation. Because back then, I would have been, it was my fault that it happened. That's kind of how people would look at it. I wouldn't have been the victim. It would have been my fault. So that's kind of the mentality. It's not like it is today. And anyway, it showed up as nightmares, night terrors. I got, like I said last week, very depressed, just all types of things. But I guess what I'm trying to say, very irritable, angry, couldn't eat, flashbacks. You were saying smells, avoidance, like did not want to go back to where it happened. Still to this day, there's certain things that will, sometimes trigger something in me, and it will make me remember. Although I've had years of therapy, like I said, and I'm at a much better place now. I can talk about it. I can actually help people get through their experiences now. So it's all been very therapeutic for me, and I can, do that without any issues. But I guess the important thing here is just to let people know that there's different types of PTSD. It's not just our veterans, people who have been raped, people who have been sexually abused, people who have lost a loved one, people who were victims in Florence, who have seen whole car accidents, COVID. I mean, all types can experience PTSD.
And the reason that it really falls under that anxiety disorder cluster is because these events that you've described that happen to younger children, to older people, all walks of life, is that anxiety. Because again, anything that threatens our safety, right? And that's what sexual abuse and physical abuse and verbal abuse, all that threatens our sense of safety and well-being. It really just creates that fight or flight. And that's a whole anxiety mechanism that gets triggered again over and over again. And so that's why it falls under the cluster of anxiety disorders. But thanks for helping us really see the broad spectrum of what PTSD can capture. Because it's not just, people in war, that kind of violence. It captures a lot of things. Mm-hmm. The last one we'll talk about is social anxiety disorder, and a lot of people have this issue. I saw it a lot when I was working in school counseling. The social anxiety. Some kids who just don't want to come to school and be away from mom or be away from their security figures. But it's not just a childhood disorder. I mean, it gets into adulthood too, where I don't want to go out in crowds. I want to avoid crowds at all costs. I don't feel comfortable. And some of us at some level have that. But again, when it gets to the point where, I'm going to avoid, I can't go to work now because there's too many people at work and I've got to avoid that social crowd. Or I can't go to the grocery store, or I can't go to church anymore and do the things that I want to do because of this social anxiety, this fear of, being around these people, because again, I'm afraid that, I'm going to embarrass myself or something bad's going to happen. I'm going to be ridiculed, pointed out. And so all that anxiety builds up, and the only way that I know how to deal with it is to flight or stay away from it, avoid it at all costs, and or freeze. And I just freeze up and I just can't force myself to go out. So social anxiety disorders are a thing. They're very real, and they can be very impairing as well. So kind of pointing out those different ways that anxiety manifests themselves. Now we'll talk about some of the treatments or interventions. So how do we deal with this? And so Kelly, we segue kind of into that from your self-disclosure in that with depression, in the treatment of that. talk therapy, going to somebody who's trained, a professional, who knows how to listen and discern symptomology, to frame it, to explain it, and to help, come up with ideas and ways. Okay, so how can we change the way we think about things? How can we reconstruct our sense of self, our self-esteem, our how we view ourselves? How can we reconstruct scenarios, situations, people? And so that comes through talk therapy.
And that is actually a very beneficial form of therapy. It takes a lot of work, but as you were saying, you reframe your thinking. I personally grew up with these, beliefs that were not true. So I had to, find a way to look at those in a different light. So yes, talk therapy is wonderful. And I would suggest that to anyone who has not tried it, give it a try. As I said before, it's worth it.
One of the most recent examples, and somebody I know that, had kind of kept, and again, it's kind of human nature whenever we start having the symptoms of depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking. It's like, well, people are going to think I'm crazy. And I don't want people to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm weak and that I can't handle life. And I just don't want people to think bad of me if I really tell them the thoughts that I have. But these thoughts become so powerful because they're not given the light of day. They're kept in the darkness there, and they grow powerful. And that's what becomes impairing or immobilizing. So when people start to talk about it, when it starts to be okay to talk about it, in all that power that the anxiety had, the depression had, it's like, oh, okay, so this is normal, or at least fairly normal. I mean, other people have these thoughts or experiences or symptoms that I've kind of kept inside. And with anxiety, again, it's very fear-based. So the more we talk about it, the more we reframe it and rebrand ourselves and how we deal with it and how we understand it, we start to not fear it as much, and we start to feel more confident. We start to feel more capable of dealing with these anxieties that we carry around. And just the fact that being able to talk about it and reframe it and understand what's going on, that there are physiological things in our bodies, these chemicals, whether they're the neurotransmitters in our brain that need some adjustment, whether it's the hormones and adrenaline and cortisol that are just, coursing through our veins, and we need to understand how that affects us physiologically and psychologically. But the talking about it helps to demystify, this fear or concern that I'm going crazy, people aren't going to understand, they're going to label me, and so forth and so on. And that's why talk therapy, I think, is such a critical component of dealing with the things that we're talking about in mental health, so that it can be kind of reframed, normalized, and put into perspective of what we're up against, and that it's something we can actually manage over time. That it's nothing that we want control of it. There are things we can do to control bits and pieces of it. For some reason, I think you're on mute still, Kelly.
Can you hear me now? I was going to say that the other thing too is, through all of that, you find your voice. And then when you do, like you said, when you do get the courage to start to share with other people, you realize, oh, wow, I'm not alone. There are other people out there that have experienced this, more people than you realize. And I just want to say that it allows you to take back your power.
So the talk therapy, we didn't talk much about support groups when we were talking about depression, but again, when you get with other people, and you hear the other stories and what we can learn from other people and coping mechanisms that other people may have learned about and now employ, it's in their daily toolkit, for anxiety management or depression management. Hey, what kind of tools do you use? Well, okay, I want to use that tool too. Oh, it's a screwdriver, does a lot of great things, right? And wow. So yeah, some of these coping mechanisms when it comes to mental health that we'll continue to talk about. And one is just oxygen, right? I mean, when we talk about anxiety, we're talking about your breathing becomes more rapid, right? And so one of the major tools that you can put in your toolkit, kind of jumping ahead here, but is simply regulating your breath and recentering yourself to focus on your breath and your breathing, because then once your brain starts to get that oxygen, that thing that keeps us alive, when we start to get that precious oxygen back in our brain, maybe our headache starts to feel a little better, right? Maybe we start to think a little clearer. Maybe we feel less foggy because, yes, I'm getting the right amount of just simple oxygen in my brain, because the anxiety is increasing my heart rate and it's making everything just go faster, faster, faster. So back to support groups, we can learn things like that when we're talking to folks. Medication also certainly is a part of it, helping to regulate the brain chemicals that can exacerbate the anxiety. That is certainly, for some people, they need medication. Now, that doesn't mean that they're on it for a lifetime, that it's heavy medication. Sometimes medication can impair people. We're not talking about that. But something, even for panic disorders, right? There's something what we call on an as-needed basis, or PRN, right? And so there are medications that when we feel this really strong wave of anxiety coming on, we can just take something temporarily to kind of bring us to help as a tool, so that we can use our other cognitive coping mechanisms to deal with it. And then lifestyle changes, right? We've talked about exercise. Last episode on depression, we focused on the importance of exercise. So again, if a person has not included exercise, because what does that do? We talked about the benefits, but one, it helps to burn off the adrenaline and the cortisol from anxiety hormones in the body. So the exercise helps to regulate that and to burn off all the excess of that. So, of course, appetite, again, part of the lifestyle changes. And then what we talked about, meditation, and music and art and all the different types of coping mechanisms that we can incorporate into our daily lifestyles to manage anxiety.
Yes, I think those are all very, very important. The meditation and yoga, the breathing that you mentioned earlier is actually huge. It's actually shocking sometimes. I don't think any of us realize how much stress we're actually carrying around. Like, even to the extent that, like, maybe we're holding our shoulders tight, or until we start breathing and like taking that deep breath in and then letting it out and doing that maybe 10 times. And then you just kind of feel the stress start to fade away. I mean, that's just such a huge, huge tool, as you say, to use for dealing with any type of anxiety.
So, Kelly, it's amazing to me because, we said, well, we'll try to keep this at 30 minutes, right? Keep it at 30 minutes because people have things in their life. We're at 43 already. It's like, where does the time go when we're sitting here talking about these things? It's just amazing to me. There's like this fast forward on the clock. We do want to do a few things with myths, though, and reality. So, yeah, if you want to shoot a couple of those myths out there, we'll quickly talk about that because I think some of it's relevant to what we're trying to say. We'll try to at least include some of those. So go ahead, Kelly. Don't omit
Okay.
that.
We'll try and go through this a little bit faster. I cannot believe it's been that long. All right, Bill. So if I put a rubber band around my wrist and snap it every time I have a bad thought, the reality, is that gonna help me?
Well, that's pretty masochistic there, Kelly. I would not recommend that. That's painful. And it actually is kind of reinforcing this negative thinking because it's patterns, right? And what I say about the brain and these chemicals and our thoughts, I like to hike, right? And hiking, when you take a trail and you keep hiking it, you're going to wear a path out. And then when you see water and how water comes down and forms, it makes the rivers and things like that. So do thoughts. Thoughts create these paths in our brain. And so what we're trying to do is recreate and create rather new pathways in our brain. So yeah, don't snap a rubber band on your hand, Kelly, and hurt yourself in that way. Yeah, that's not going to fix anything. It's just going to be painful. But rather, we need to focus more on, okay, wait, I need to stop, and think about my patterns. If it's negative Nelly, how can I turn negative Nelly into a positive Polly, and start thinking of, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because my coping mechanism is positivity and thinking positive. But yes, no, leave the rubber band somewhere else, in your hair, maybe.
In my drawer, yeah.
Yeah, the drawer you're trying to clean out, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. So if a panic attack gets too bad, am I going to pass out?
So, well, I mean, if you're holding your breath and you don't have enough oxygen, you could possibly pass out. But back to that whole feeling of a panic attack. Once if you've gone to the doctor for a panic attack, and the doctor says, "Look, it's not your heart. Okay, you're not having heart attacks. Your heart is strong. You're a good, healthy adult individual." So yeah, just the panic attack doesn't mean that you're going to die, pass out, lose control, or embarrass yourself, become incontinent. That's embarrassing, right? You don't want to become incontinent from a panic attack. So yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
So if you have anxiety disorder, is it important to avoid stress and the situations that make you feel that way?
Yeah, so right. So if we want to, again, allow ourselves to be immobilized and impaired by our anxiety, by the stress that creates anxiety, just give up and avoid everything. But that's not a healthy way to approach life. So just because we have anxiety doesn't mean we need to avoid the things that create stress. And matter of fact, that's kind of one. Exposure response is one of those therapies that, if you get into talk therapy, that it's a cognitive behavioral approach, exposing yourself to the things that kind of stress you out, and then creating new responses, creating those new hiking paths in your brain that are a little more healthy and help us to navigate.
So in other words, what you're saying, Bill, is if I have test anxiety, it's probably not a good idea for me just to not show up for the test.
Right. Yeah. Don't show up to the study group. Don't come to the test. Yeah, you're going to fail, Kelly. You're going to fail.
All right. Good. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So the causes of anxiety disorders are usually rooted in childhood. So effective therapy, it must focus on that period.
Right. Now, and there are some, I guess, therapies out there that, if you go Freudian all the time and lay on the couch and tell me about your childhood, tell me about the relationship with your mother or your father, yeah, they can go there. That's kind of antiquated therapy. Yeah, in some cases, obviously, what you were talking about, if you're unlocking traumatic experiences, at some point you need to go back and revisit that. But again, a lot of these manifestations of anxiety that we're talking about, panic attacks, generalized anxiety, obsessive-compulsive, we don't need to go back and talk about your childhood to get into dealing with that. We're going to focus on the symptoms as an adult and what we can do as an adult to help, get those symptoms back under control, feel back in control, and go on with our lives. Absolutely.
Okay, so here's another one for you. Medications for anxiety, they're all addictive. Why in the world should I take them?
And, again,
necessary?
Well, there's some truth in the fact that some of the medications, the anti-anxiolytics, if not used according to doctor recommendation, people can become addicted. People can use them inappropriately, can get high with some of those, and that's what will create the addictions over time. However, if used as prescribed by a physician, by a doctor, by a psychiatrist, and again, used only as needed, again, it's just another tool in the toolkit. So don't be afraid, when you say, well, I had an aunt or an uncle or somebody in my church or neighborhood or whatever, they got addicted and made their life worse and ended up, with all kinds of problems. Not that in the story that may have happened and can happen. But again, if we are following medical advice and being responsible and using medications in a constructive way, it's just another tool for the toolkit.
Okay, so myth or reality, medication is the only thing that's going to help an anxiety disorder.
Yeah, no, we've spelled that one out. You're going to need a balance of things. Again, I love the toolbox analogy. We just have so many things when we take it to our job site of life, and we say, you know what? Okay, wait, I don't need a pill right now. I need to regulate my breathing. Okay, great. No, I don't need a pill right now. I need to get some exercise. Great. Okay, I need to read a book. I need to paint a picture. I need to journal in my journal. Yeah, those are the things I need to be doing. Just the medication alone is not going to make you a more balanced, changing the lifestyle things that need to happen for you to have a healthier, more functional lifestyle.
And the last one, people that have anxiety disorders, they're just worry warts, they're neurotic. There's nothing really that can be done to make a difference. I could just tell them to get over it.
And that would be nice. I would like to tell the negative Nellies that I've been around in my lifetime, hey, dude, get over it, right? Let it go. But again, somebody who is, back to the medical model, if they're having seizures, you just don't tell somebody, dude, they're just seizures, get over it. Dude, it's just cancer. Get over it. That's just, it doesn't even make sense when we put it into terms like that, right?
Right.
So when somebody is experiencing a mental health disorder in the form of depression and anxiety and the combination, schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress, all that, it's real. And we have to understand, just because somebody might not have those symptoms and they're like, hey, look, yeah, I get stressed out, but it doesn't bother me. I can go to bed without, sitting there for hours worrying about stuff. Well, that's great, man. I'm glad that you can do that. But, I've so many people, anxiety affects sleep, the ability just to turn the brain off so that I can relax enough to fall into some deep sleep and get the needed sleep that I need. And, again, the anxiety, the hypervigilance of anxiety that keeps us from being able to relax our brains enough to go to sleep. That's a real deal right there. Because if you're not sleeping for a while, it can start turning into hallucinations and all kinds of different things. So it's real. We need to treat it as real and understand it as real.
Well, thank you for those answers, Bill. That was awesome.
Well,
You did a 100.
Hey, look, I appreciate it. I'm going to stop flicking myself with a rubber band now that we've gotten through that little exercise. So, yeah, we're at 53 minutes now, Kelly. We're going to do this under 60s, but I do want to positivity to counteract the negative Nelly concept of anxiety. Just want to throw out some things that I think I've used, that I've recommended that people use over the years, and that really these are good tools to have in your toolkit. And one of them is certainly journaling. If that negativity and doom and gloom and obsessiveness is coming in, and you just need a break from that, you need to create a different hiking trail in your brain. Do some journaling and focus on what are the positive things. I promise you that if you really objectively look at a day, there's going to be some things that happen in your day that were very positive. They just get overshadowed by the other things that we didn't like or that we obsess and worry about. So take the time to journal things that happen in the day positive. And if you can't think of anything, then create a positive experience in your brain, because I really do believe that what mind matters, and what matters affects your mind. So when you have something in your mind and you want to create it, then nurture that thought. Give that thought some tender, loving care, and let that thought manifest itself in some way, shape, or form. And so by journaling it, it's a way to physically get it out of your head and onto paper, to see it, and then to manipulate it after that, and to let it evolve and let it grow. So I'm a big advocate for journaling, and then gratitude. Again, expressing gratitude for the things that when the positive things happen, let people know that you appreciate what they've done and what they've said, that it made a difference, and promote that. Because what we promote in others, Kelly, guess what? It usually manifests in ourselves. If we encourage others and give other people positive feedback and really just provide that encouragement, we're really encouraging ourselves and really validating ourselves too. So definitely do that. The other thing that I say is take a trip down memory lane, review your history. You know what I'm saying? I mean, sometimes we think, I'm not going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be able to make it, but review your history. Just take a look at all the things that you've accomplished, all the adversity that you've come through, the things the challenges and the obstacles that were in your way, and you found a way to get through that, to get over it. And what did that take from you? What did that create in you? And how's that made you a better version of yourself? And what can I continue to work on myself, giving myself that self-confidence, and that belief, that encouragement, because when it's intrinsic, it's good to hear it from others, but we shouldn't depend on others to do that. We should be able to really be our best self-cheerleader, and we're definitely our own best critic, but we need to be our own best cheerleader too, and really just embrace ourselves and if we do look for our history, we're going to find all kinds of opportunities to say, you know what, that was pretty cool, and that took a lot, and wow, I'm kind of proud of myself for that.
I think those are all wonderful, and actually some of the ones that you've just said are ones that I use as well. So I'm not going to take up much time to say many, because I do the journaling. We've already talked about the breathing. That's a technique that I use often for myself even. I think one thing people can do is just ask themselves, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like if they're feeling anxiety over something, like what is the worst thing that can happen? And then ask themselves, okay, so how am I going to cope if this does happen? I mean, oftentimes what people fear, it never happens. And I think that's a big one. That's something to, for people to really think about. Take a break from watching the news and all the noise, getting off of social media if they can, if they feel like that's where a lot of their anxiety is coming from. I see so many students in my office or talk to them over the phone, and oftentimes their anxiety and depression is coming from what they're hearing and seeing on social media. They're comparing themselves to others. They're allowing what others are saying about them to influence the way they look and feel about themselves. And so stay off of it, try and shut it down, limit yourself, 10, 30 minutes a day, whatever it takes. And I think also writing, positive affirmations and posting them around your mirror when you're getting dressed in the morning, or, somewhere where you're going to see it. Those types of things I think are very helpful as well. And then maybe setting some goals for yourself and being able to look at those so you can visualize, make a board. Those things help. I think those would be very beneficial.
And Kelly, just, to plug all the things that we're talking about, and you've done a great job on our website. So if people are saying, hey, those are great tools that they're talking about, hey, well, look, just go to our website, go to Craven Community College, counseling resources, And you're going to find all kinds of tools for your personal toolkit. Again, for information on just understanding the screening, the self-screening for anxiety and depression and things like that. But more so just the toolkit so that you can say, oh, okay, I like that coping mechanism. I like that idea. Kelly, one of the recent ones is just music and listening to certain kinds of music that can be therapeutic and comfort our brains and put our brains into a different place and a different space so we can get some positive work done up there and shut all that other noise that's negative, or noise that is chaos. And music can be one of those tools to help us do just to make that shift in the brain. And I can't express enough that we are creating new channels in our brain. You've got this great cable network in your brain, and you can create extra channels in your brain that are positive and that will take you to different places. So please use the website. Kelly spends a lot of time to bring you things that are very helpful. So.
Thank you. And I also just want to add to that we have just added a link that is just for anxiety and depression. And so you can go on there, click that link, and it takes you to a website that has all types of information just on those subjects.
All right, Kelly, we almost made it at an hour, but you know what? Again, for folks who, and I've talked to folks who listen to podcasts, that listen, to people talking, it's like, hey, there's something therapeutic about that. So for people who benefit from that, here's a full 60 minutes for you. But we hope that there are parts that are very helpful for you. And we'll come back and do another one soon. But Kelly, thank you so much. It's always a good time to spend time together and talking about these things that affect us, our students, our families, our neighbors, people around us, and just so we can understand it better and give people the tools to work with.
Thank you, Bill. I've enjoyed it.
All right. Until next time, Kelly.
Sounds good.